Hi everyone. Chinese food is ubiquitous. A few months ago I visited Tofino for the very first time, and wandering around that little town I found a Chinese restaurant. It was called Gary's Kitchen. Maybe you've seen it. And I have a friend who lives all the way on the other side of the country in a place called Happy Valley Goose Bay in Labrador. It's a very small place, and there is a Chinese restaurant there, and it's called Hong Kong Restaurant. And so Chinese restaurants can be found in almost every corner of the world, and it speaks to not only how far and wide Chinese migrants have traveled, but also how popular Chinese food is. Now, there's one place that I've been visiting over the last few years again and again, a place that's not so in love with Chinese food. That place is Italy. Italy. It defies logic in some ways because the prevailing myth is that Marco Polo left Venice, traveled to China, learned how to make noodles, traveled back to Italy, and pasta was born. That's the myth. But it makes sense if you think about it, because to Italians, food is very important to them. So any kind of new food, foreign food or ethnic food, is seen as an intrusion or a contaminant to their society and their very identity. Chinese immigration is also very new to Italy. The Chinese migrants have been going there for just about 20 years. So Italians are still grappling with this new global reality. Chinese food is so detested in some parts of Italy that in a small town in northern Italy, they banned the hanging of red lanterns outside of Chinese restaurants. The politicians said the lanterns look too oriental. In another city, a local politician was followed by the paparazzi as he went for dinner one night at a Chinese restaurant. It was so scandalous, right? So they had to follow him, take those photos, put it on the tabloid, and that led to his eventual political demise. And I know personally a Chinese migrant named Pei. She recently immigrated to Italy, and she told me that when she was wandering around the small town where she lives, a little dog came up to her, so she naturally bent down to pet it. And she looked up and she saw the Italian owner just running over, grabbed the dog away, and then turned to the dog and said, "Don't go near the Chinese. Don't you know they eat dog meat?" Pei couldn't understand a lot of Italian at that time, but she understood 3 words: Chinese eat dog. And she said to me, you know, this Italian was speaking to the dog, but I don't think, you know, that person said it for the dog's benefit. I think that person said it for me. And needless to say, she was very offended. Although she later revealed to me that in China, she has eaten dog meat on many occasions, and she liked the taste very much. One of the biggest Chinatowns in all of Europe can be found in Tuscany, not far from the Leaning Tower of Pisa, in a place called Prato. Prato for centuries has been a textile town, and today it still is, except that it's dominated by Chinese immigrants. And they've created a niche for themselves. It's called Pronto Moda, fast fashion. Pronto Moda has a lot of big clients, H&M, Topshop, maybe you heard of them. And people from all over Europe come to Prato to buy made-in-Italy clothing by Chinese immigrants at rock-bottom prices. Needless to say, there's a lot of tension in Prato. The Italians think the Chinese are taking over. Prato's Chinatown is northwest of the Old City, outside of the Old City walls. And this is a neighborhood where the Italian storefronts, the delis and the bakeries have faded away, and they're replaced by Chinese noodle shops, restaurants, supermarkets, karaoke bars, internet cafes, and wedding photography studios. And it's very rare to see an Italian in this part of town. Prato's Chinatown. I was there last year, and my husband and I wandered around for 2 days, and then we decided to go inside the city walls to check out the old town. Inside the old town, beautiful squares, medieval churches, cute little restaurants, and we decided to have dinner there one night at the oldest trattoria in town. So we get to the restaurant, and it's beautiful inside, dimly lit, paintings on the wall, and couples sitting at tables, speaking in hushed tones. It was a world away from the raucous Chinese restaurants that were just actually 3 blocks away from this trattoria. So we walk in, and the place goes silent. Forks literally stop in midair, and all eyes are on us. And the waiter rushes over, and he speaks a little English, and he's actually really nice. So we get seated, and we start our meal, and the food is delicious. But throughout the entire meal, people are staring at us uncomfortably. And it dawned on me that even though Prato is home to one of the largest Chinese populations in all of Europe, the Chinese rarely entered the old town, maybe never even stepped foot in that trattoria. And it was in Prato that I realized that the Chinese were quite literally living outside of the walls of mainstream society. Throughout my travels in Italy over the last few years, there's one place that I found that seemed to have broken down the walls between East and West. And it was a convent. 2 hours south of Bologna, in the Italian countryside, built on top of a hill, surrounded by vineyards. Beautiful place. When I first arrived there in the spring of this year, the Italian nuns rushed out to greet me in their chocolate-colored veils, and they grabbed my hands, and instead of saying, "Buongiorno," they said, "Ni hao, huan yi ni," which means, "Hello, welcome," in pristine Chinese. It turns out the nuns have been taking Chinese lessons to better service the growing Chinese population in that area. There are not a lot of them, they're just a few hundred, but they were learning. And they served me lunch that day. The meal started with insalata, followed by primi, secondi, baozi, and then dolce. And at the table I was sitting at, the conversation flowed from Italian to Chinese and back to Italian again. And I realized that food was so important to both our cultures. And it was the mixing of that food, the fusion of that food, that brought us together. There's a lot of fusion in Vancouver. We have interracial families, we have fusion restaurants, and we have events like this one, where we get to sample delicious experimentations that are both yin and yang. I hope that an event like this can be held in Italy one day, but I think it will take some time. Before the Chinese begin a meal, they say 2 words. 慢吃. It means eat slowly. Savor your meal. Enjoy it. The Italians say buon appetito. It means good appetite. The words and the languages are different, but the sentiment is the same. Buon appetito.